Week 13 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 15 tight ends. I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Travis Kelce, we know he's one of the best tight ends of all time. This season, the numbers have taken a little bit of hit, and he's been injured on and off with that low ankle injury, missing the first game of the season and then banged up in the midweeks. But Travis Kelce still goes out there, and not even with his best games, he's still putting up 15, 20 fantasy points. So this week in a matchup at the Green Bay Packers, where they're not great against tight ends this season, Kelce number 1, number 2, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So George Kittle, he's having a nice season. I know last week the numbers weren't really there for George Kittle, but this week in Philadelphia, this obviously is going to be a shootout, NFC Championship rematch between these two teams. And George Kittle, one of the better route runners still at the tight end position, still has that yard after catch ability and a big target in the red zone. So this week in Philadelphia, where I expect it to be a high-scoring game and a shootout, I got Kittle once again having a big game and bouncing off that pedestrian performance last week. Number 3, Sam LaPorta of the Detroit Lions. So Sam LaPorta quickly becoming one of the better tight ends in the league in his rookie season. And this week here, pretty good matchup at the New Orleans Saints. Well, we know this Saint team is a middle-of-the-pack defense, but another indoor game, which is always a plus for any football player, where you don't have to deal with other elements instead of just playing the game. So Sam LaPorta, good route runner, number 2 option in the passing game behind St. Brown. And this week in New Orleans, I think he puts in a great performance. Number 4, Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Evan Ingram, he's been a solid producer for this Jacksonville Jaguar team over the last couple seasons since he signed with them. And I know the last couple weeks, Evan Ingram numbers have definitely went down, but this Jaguar offense after the bye week, they've really started to move the football. And Trevor Lawrence, the last 2 weeks, has played the best football he's played all season. And this week, Monday Night Football, big game versus Cincinnati, a defense that's middle of the pack, and a defense that's going to be on the field more, obviously, with Joe Burrow out for the season, where their offense could have some quicker drives. So Evan Ingram, a good route runner, can line up anywhere in the formation. And this week versus Cincinnati, I think he has a bounce-back performance. Number 5, Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. So Trey McBride, ever since he stepped into the starting lineup for Zach Ertz, who's out with injury. Trey McBride, he's been playing great football, and pretty much weekly, he's good for double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues. So last week, he had 13 fantasy points. This week, I know it's a tougher matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league at the Pittsburgh Steelers. But right now, Trey McBride, he's going out there. He's a number 1 target in that offense pretty much. Him or Hollywood Brown, it's pretty close in my opinion. And this week, even in a tougher matchup, I have him having a good game. Number 6, Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Goedert, he's trying to push the play. And this is a big game here because it's a big swing. If the Eagles could win this game, they're 3 games up then as a number 1 spot in the NFC. But if they lose, the 49ers are 1 game out. So Dallas Goedert a few weeks ago broke that forearm versus the Dallas Cowboys. He's missed the last couple weeks. And this Eagle offense, they've missed them as well, where it was easier for Hurts to have more openings for A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, where Dallas Goedert took up the middle of the field, and he was a playmaker and a tight end that could go out there and make plays. So this week here in a potential high-scoring game with the Eagles and the 49ers, I think Dallas Goedert, if he returns, could put in a good performance. And I don't think he's going to be limited as well. It's not like it was a leg or something. It was the forearm. But I think he comes back and plays well. Number 7, Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. I know Dalton Schultz last week, he had a bad game with only 1.20 fantasy points. That was the worst game of the season here for Dalton Schultz. This week, though, a great matchup versus the Denver Broncos that give up the most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So right now, Dalton Schultz, a good route runner. Him and C.J. Stroud have a great rapport and great chemistry. And last week was just an off game because we know Tank Dell and Nico Collins still had big performances in that one. So I think Dalton Schultz bounces back and has a good game. And we saw David Njoku last week have 11.9 fantasy points versus this Bronco defense. Number 8, Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. So Ferguson, for the majority of the season, he's been the number 2 option in the passing game behind CeeDee Lamb. But Brandon Cooks, the last few weeks, he's definitely emerged, and he's finally panning out for this Dallas Cowboy team. But Jake Ferguson, he's a good route runner, works the middle of the field. And Dak Prescott's always like the tight ends in his offense, going back to when he first came into the league with Witten and Dalton Schultz over the last few seasons. So this week here in a pretty good matchup, in a high-scoring game possibly, because we know most of these Thursday night games are high-scoring. I like Ferguson to have a bounce-back game after the last 2 weeks. The numbers have dropped a little bit. Number 9, David Njoku of the Cleveland Browns. So David Njoku, we know he's a good route runner. We know he's an athletic specimen at the tight end position. And this guy, if he wanted to be a wide receiver, he could be, I think. That's how good and athletic he is. So this week here, pretty decent matchup with the Rams. I know a lot of quarterback issues right now. Thompson Robinson, we don't know if he's going to start after getting concussed. You got Joe Flacco there, PJ Walker. But either way, David Njoku's been a mainstay in this offense and pretty much been the number one target offensively over the last few weeks, where he's had better numbers than Amari Cooper with 3 double-digit fantasy games in a row. So this week here with a decent matchup, and regardless of the quarterback, David Njoku's going to be the security blanket, and he's a mismatch for most safeties and most linebackers, whoever covers him. Number 10, Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Pat Freiermuth had one of the best games of his career coming back. I know he came back in Week 11. He didn't do much in that game at the Cleveland Browns, but then last week a nice ball game for Pat Freiermuth it was, and this week here he versus the Cleveland Browns once again. So Pat Freiermuth, we know he's a good route runner, we know he's a good security blanket for the young quarterback in Kenny Pickett, and he's pretty much been one of the only targets in that offense that's been consistent over the last season and a half since Pickett got drafted by the Steelers team last season. So right now, I know he didn't have a great game versus defense a few weeks ago, but Freiermuth looked healthy. And with the new offensive coordinator in there as well, they found easier ways to get him open. Number 11, Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders. A solid season here for Logan Thomas. Injuries have always been a concern, and I've mentioned that a lot in my videos over the weeks here, that Thomas, if he's healthy, he could be a decent tight end. Big target in the red zone, 6'6", 6'7". I know last week he didn't do much, but it's a whole that Washington Commander team didn't do much, where they got the doors blown off by the Dallas Cowboys. And this week here, they're going to have to put points on the board versus a very high-powered offense and one of the best offenses in the league, obviously, in the Miami Dolphins. But I think Logan Thomas in this offense has a better performance because this Dolphin D isn't as good as the Cowboy defense. But anyway, Thomas bounces back. Number 12, Cade Otton, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Cade Otton, he's been a solid tight end this season with at least 8 or more fantasy points in 7 games this season. Number 2 option in that offense, I believe. Chris Godwin, the numbers really haven't been there. So in the passing game, like I said, Otton, number 2 option behind Mike Evans. He's a big target, 6'5", 6'6". Baker Mayfield, he's always liked the tight end in his offense this year. And this week here, it's a good matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, where we know the Panther team, the worst team in the league at 1-10, and they fired head coach Frank Reich as well. So Cade Otton, Tampa Bay back home, good weather it should be, good matchup. And this week he cracks the top 12, number 13, Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints. So Taysom Hill, we know he's a gadget guy. We know he can throw the football a little bit. Could run the football at the goal line. And even catch passes as well. And this week here in a matchup versus Detroit, and especially with Chris Olave possibly being out in this game with a concussion, and also Rashid Shaheed and Michael Thomas out already in this game. Taysom Hill, he's a guy they're going to use more in this offense, in my opinion, is this New Orleans Saints team, because they're going to have to put points on the board versus this pretty solid offense of the Lions. I think he'll use him in many formations. He'll get a decent amount of touches. And this week here, after coming off a 7.5-point fantasy day in PPR leagues, I think he could top it. Number 14, Kyle Pitts, Atlanta Falcons. To Kyle Pitts, it's been an up-and-down season. And this Falcon offense, for the most part, it's been up and down as well with them. Some weeks they've had good weeks, and some weeks they haven't done much, and they've squeaked out a lot of ball games this season. So this week here, tougher matchup at the New York Jets, one of the better defenses obvious in the league. I know Kyle Pitts, he's an athletic tight end. He could line up as a receiver if you really needed to. He's got a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, but this season he just really hasn't done much, is Kyle Pitts. And this week here, Desmond Ridder once again going to start for this Falcon team in a tough matchup at a good defense. He's the only reason he's ranked here in the top 15 is because of his potential, because there's any week he could break out and have a good game. And the 15th and final tight end I'm ranking is Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Gerald Everett right now, he's the second or third option in this passing game here for this Los Angeles Charger team. He found the end zone once again versus the Baltimore Ravens in the Week 12 loss. And Gerald Everett, we know he's an athlete. Last season, he had a pretty decent season with this Los Angeles Charger team. And this week here, it's a pretty decent matchup, I believe, with the New England Patriots. So right now, pretty much this offense is Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, and the other guys not doing much in this offense. Quentin Johnston or Guyton, and even Joshua Palmer possibly might return in this offense, but Everett still has a piece of this offense. He's still a goal line threat for this Los Angeles Charger team, and he's got a pretty decent matchup with the Patriots. That's a top 15 tight ends I'm ranking for Week 13 of the fantasy football season.